She looked like she didn't belong there. Her coat was stained with dust. Her boots were cracked. Her eyes, though tired, were calm, like someone who had seen more than most people in the room ever would. But when she stepped inside the boutique, it was as if the air changed. The sound of the door chime was soft, but sharp enough to turn every head in the store. Beverly Luxe was the kind of boutique that didn't advertise, because it didn't need to. The people who shopped here didn't look at price tags. They ordered custom fittings. They sipped champagne while waiting for alterations. And none of them had ever seen someone walking like this. Behind the marble checkout counter, a tall, tan woman named Amber subtly raised an eyebrow. She leaned closer to her co-worker and whispered, "Oh, wow. Did someone leave the back alley open?" A few giggles echoed from the fitting lounge, where two women were sipping their midday lattes. One of them muttered, "Wrong place, sweetheart." The woman, seemingly unaware or unbothered, took a slow step forward. Her boots made the tiniest creak against the polished floor. She looked around, at the silk dresses hanging like art pieces, the chandeliers casting gold across the walls, and the quiet luxury humming through the building. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply looked. Amber glanced at her manager, Brandon, who was busy organizing a private appointment in the back office. She rolled her eyes and decided to act. With perfect posture and a slightly forced smile, Amber walked over and said, "Hi. I'm not sure if you're looking for something in particular, but this boutique specializes in exclusive collections. Just so you're aware." The woman met her gaze, silent. Amber hesitated, then continued, "We don't really do browsing. Most of our pieces are custom or pre-reserved. Appointments only." Still no response. Instead, the woman turned and walked toward a nearby rack. Her fingers, rough and dry, glided gently across a line of coats, cashmere, wool, silk blends, some embroidered with delicate crystals. Her touch was slow, respectful. Amber followed her, visibly annoyed now. "Ma'am, these items are very delicate. If you're not seriously shopping, I can recommend another store down the street." No reply. The woman paused at a cream-colored trench coat with dark buttons and subtle fur trim. She flipped the price tag. $4,800. She nodded slightly, as if remembering something, then moved on to the next one. From the corner of the room, a teenage girl who had come with her wealthy aunt whispered, "Why is she even here?" Her aunt, dressed head to toe in designer labels, chuckled. "Sweetie, sometimes people wander into places they don't understand." The woman turned toward the far wall, where a display of vintage handbags was mounted like museum pieces. Her eyes stopped at a dark burgundy clutch with a gold clasp. It was the only piece that looked out of place. Older, rare. She stared at it for a long time. Amber finally snapped, "Okay, I think that's enough. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This isn't a Goodwill store." The woman looked at her, calmly, and said nothing. Brandon, now alerted by the raised voices, stepped out from the back and assessed the scene. "Is there a problem here?" Amber huffed. She just walked in. No appointment. No card. She's been touching everything. Brandon's eyes met the woman's. Something about her gave him pause. Not fear, not familiarity. Just something. He nodded. Let her look. Amber blinked. "Seriously?" Brandon replied. "We'd had stranger guests." Then turned and disappeared again. The woman glanced at Amber, then returned her focus to the handbag. She stood there for nearly a minute, in silence. The whole boutique had gone quiet. Everyone watching. No one knowing what to say. Then, finally, the woman turned to Amber and asked in a voice low and clear, "Do you carry anything from the Garla collection? Winter 2002. Amber frowned. "No, that's been discontinued for, like, decades." The woman nodded slightly and whispered, "I know." She turned and continued browsing, leaving Amber standing there speechless. But behind her, the silence in the boutique grew heavier, a sense that something wasn't quite what it seemed to have begun to form in the air, and no one could quite look away. Amber returned behind the counter with a huff, grabbing her sparkling water and muttering just loud enough for her co-worker to hear, She's probably one of those weirdos who watches fashion documentaries and thinks she knows couture. Garella? Please. Her co-worker, Chloe, leaned in. What even is Garella? Sound like pasta. Amber chuckled. Exactly. It was some old school line from like 20 years ago. Kind of artsy, minimalist. Not really for people who actually buy things. But not everyone in the store dismissed a woman. In the corner, a girl named Harper, no older than 16, sat awkwardly on a velvet bench beside her aunt, who was trying on her third pair of $1,000 heels. Harper wasn't scrolling her phone. She was watching the woman. Carefully. There was something magnetic about her. Not her clothes. Not her face. But the way she moved. Measured. Thoughtful. Like every piece of fabric she touched mattered. The woman stopped in front of a mannequin wearing a limited edition black dress, hemmed with hand-stitch beading. It was a showpiece. The kind of thing only celebrities wore at galas. She studied it for a long time. Amber approached again, now visibly annoyed. I already told you. That's not for trying on. It's just for display. The woman didn't reach for the dress. She looked at Amber and spoke evenly. I remember when we approved that trim. Took forever to find the right kind of thread that wouldn't unravel under heat. Amber blinked. I'm sorry, what? The thread, the woman repeated. You're using a blend of nylon and silk. It looks good in daylight, but gets frizzy under certain types of artificial lighting, especially LEDs. Amber let out a small, condescending laugh. Okay, that's enough. You've made your little fashion speech. Now, unless you plan on buying something, I'm going to have to... Amber, Brandon's voice echoed from the back. She turned. I said let her be, he called again. Amber's jaw tightened. She bit her tongue and stormed back behind the counter, throwing her hands in the air. The woman moved on to the accessories wall, where several high-end scarves were displayed like delicate works of art. She picked one, a soft lavender blend, and ran her fingers gently across the weave. A woman nearby, wearing diamonds and a tight designer blazer, smirked. Is that one of those vision boards come-to-life moments? The woman didn't react, but Brandon did. He emerged from the back again, walked slowly across the boutique, and stood beside the woman. For the first time, his voice softened. Ma'am, he said carefully, have we met before? The woman looked up at him. Not officially, she said, but I've watched this boutique grow. You expanded after 2016, right? Brandon blinked. Yes, we doubled space. Wait, how did you? I read, she said, simply. He stared at her, trying to place the face, the jawline, the voice. Something was off, or maybe familiar. Amber couldn't hold back anymore. She rushed over. Brandon, you're letting her play you. This is some kind of game. She asked about Garella. Garella, you know that line's been buried for years. The woman turned to Amber with calm, steady eyes. You seem to know a lot about what's been buried, she said softly. And then she did something no one expected. She opened her tattered bag, pulled out a leather-bound folder, and quietly placed it on the counter. Amber scoffed. Oh, what now? Coupons. But Brandon opened the folder. Inside were fashion sketches. Dozens. All hand-drawn. All signed. And every signature read the same. Marissa Garella. Amber froze. Chloe covered her mouth. Harper stood from her seat. And the woman, Marissa, didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She simply said, I asked about the winter 2002 line. Because I made it. Every stitch. The boutique went silent. Even the music seemed to stop. Brandon held the sketchbook in both hands like it was made of glass. His fingers traced over the lines, designs that weren't just stylish, but architectural, thoughtful, alive. He had studied Marissa Garella's work in college. He remembered the silhouettes, the tension between structure and softness. Her winter 2002 collection had sparked debates in every fashion school classroom. It wasn't just fashion. It was rebellion sewn into fabric. And now, the woman who supposedly vanished from the industry over a decade ago was standing in a store in worn-out boots and a faded coat. Amber's voice cracked through the air, unsteady. That doesn't prove anything. Anyone can forge a name. Marissa tilted her head, then gently turned to a page near the back of the folder. It was a full technical sheet. Stitch counts, fabric sourcing, embroidery specs, a red ink circle with initials, MG. Amber stared at it, her confidence draining from her face like melting ice. Brandon slowly looked up. "You're the Marissa Garella?" "I was," she said quietly. He paused. "You disappeared." "I didn't disappear," Marissa corrected him. "I walked away." The boutique staff was frozen. Chloe leaned against the counter like her knees might give out. Even the customers who had been pretending not to listen were now visibly wide-eyed, their jaws slightly parted. Amber was still shaking her head. "But why would you walk away? You were everywhere. Magazines, runways. Celebrities beg for your designs." Marissa looked around the room at the gowns, the lights, the shallow hush of money dripping from every corner. Her voice was soft. "I created beauty, but it started to rot. I watched it get priced out of meaning. Watched people tear each other down for a handbag. I started to feel like I was feeding something I no longer believed in." Amber stepped back. "So you just gave it all up?" Marissa nodded. "My husband died. Plane crash. Private jet. After that, the noise didn't matter anymore. The parties. The investors. The press. I donated most of my wealth. Kept the sketches. Lived quietly." Harper stepped closer, barely above a whisper. "But why come back now?" Marissa looked at the girl. There was no smugness in her face. No superiority. Just someone who had lived long enough to stop pretending. "I didn't come back," she said. "I just wanted to see what the industry had become, what I had forgotten, and maybe if someone still remembered the art. I'd know it was worth returning to." Brandon was still holding the folder, barely breathing. Behind them, the woman in diamonds, the one who had laughed earlier, walked over. "I bought your coat. Winter 2002. I didn't know it was yours. It was the only piece I ever kept. I wore it to my mother's funeral." Marissa gave her a quiet nod. Amber looked at the sketches again, her voice suddenly small. "We judged you. We. You judged what you saw," Marissa interrupted, not unkindly. "That's what boutiques teach you to do. That's what luxury sells. The illusion of separation." Amber's mouth opened, but no words came out. Chloe whispered, "What are we even doing?" But Marissa wasn't looking for apologies. She turned back toward the front door. Then Harper stepped forward again, holding out a blank page from a store brochure. Can you sign this?" she asked. Marissa smiled for the first time. It was faint but real. She signed it with a steady hand. MG, the same signature that once shook the runways in Paris, Milan, and New York. Then, as she approached the exit, Amber reached out awkwardly, tried to recover her footing. "Wait, if you ever want to consult or even design again, I'm sure our owner would." Marissa looked at her, not with anger, just with a strange kind of peace. Then she reached into her coat pocket and slowly pulled out a folded letter. She placed it on the counter. "For your owner," she said. Amber stared at it. "What is it?" Marissa paused at the door, then finally spoke. "Transfer of ownership." The boutique fell into stunned silence again. Marissa walked out, the soft chime of the bell ringing behind her. No one moved. Amber stared at the letter, like it was radioactive. What does she mean, transfer? Brandon unfolded the paper. His hand started shaking, and what he read made the entire room go cold. Brandon stood motionless, the folded letter open in his hands. His eyes scanned the page, then again, as if his brain refused to accept the words. Amber leaned forward. "What does it say?" His voice came out strained. "It's a purchase agreement, filed and notarized. The entire boutique has been bought out as of this morning." Amber's mouth dropped open. "Wait, what?" Chloe stepped around the counter, her heels clicking nervously. "Bought out? By who?" Brandon looked up, his face pale. "It says, Marissa Garla is now the sole owner of Beverly Lux." The room erupted. Customers started whispering and gasping. The staff looked at each other in shock. Even the uptight woman in diamonds, who had mocked Marissa only moments before, took a sudden step back as the ground had shifted beneath her. Amber's face twisted in confusion. How? When? Why would she? Brandon cut her off, pointing to a final paragraph. The papers were signed yesterday. She must have had her lawyer finalize it while we were here talking trash about her. The silence that followed was brutal. Amber's jaw clenched. This doesn't make sense. She walked in here with a backpack, like a drifter. And that drifter, Brandon said, looking her in the eye, owns your job now. Amber stepped back as if slapped. Chloe sat down slowly on the velvet bench. Holy crap, she played us all. Harper stepped forward, her voice small but certain. No, she didn't play you. She gave you a chance. You just didn't take it. Amber turned to the girl, biting her lip. Are you seriously defending her? She embarrassed everyone in here. Harper stared back. No, she exposed everyone in here. Brandon placed a letter gently on the counter, then ran both hands through his hair. She was probably watching this place for weeks, maybe longer, seeing how we treat people, seeing what we value. Amber looked around, as if the boutique no longer felt like her domain. Are we getting fired? She asked. Brandon didn't answer, because the truth was he didn't know. Out front, the streets of Beverly Hills bustled on as usual. The sun bounced off car windows. Tourists snapped pictures near storefronts. And Marissa Garella, once a ghost in the fashion world, was already halfway down the sidewalk, unnoticed now by a world that still judged by appearances. But back inside, Beverly Lux had changed. Amber, flustered and red-faced, grabbed her tablet and started furiously searching Marissa's name. Articles popped up. Headlines. Archive interviews. Photos of runway shows from Paris and Tokyo. Magazine covers from years ago. She was everywhere. Amber muttered. How did I not know who she was? Chloe leaned over her shoulder. Because you weren't trained to recognize talent. You were trained to recognize labels. A tense silence hung in the room. Then Brandon spoke again. We need to prepare for her return. If she just bought this place, she'll be back soon. Amber blinked. To do what? He looked at her. To take the keys. Outside, on the sidewalk, Marissa stopped for a moment, staring at the boutique sign above the door. Then she smiled faintly to herself. Inside, everyone waited, and the boutique, once proud and gleaming, now felt like a stage where something far bigger was about to begin. 3 days passed. The boutique had never been quieter. Gone was the usual buzz of early shoppers and phone calls about fittings. Even the music played softer, like it was unsure of itself. The staff came in early, cleaned more thoroughly, organized racks with nervous precision. Not because customers demanded it, but because they knew someone else was now watching. Someone who didn't care about appearances. Amber stood behind the counter, nervously adjusting her blazer for the third time in an hour. She hadn't slept much. Her usually sharp sarcasm had dulled into silence. Chloe tried to stay upbeat, but even her usual morning jokes fell flat. Harper, who had convinced her aunt to let her visit again, sat quietly in the corner, sketching something in a notebook. She kept glancing toward the front door, hoping she'd catch a glimpse of the woman who had changed everything without raising her voice. Brandon had been in the back office all morning, reading, researching, watching old interviews. He had found a video clip from 2003, Marissa Garella standing beside a runway in Milan, talking about minimalism, about elegance that didn't scream but whispered. She was 27, he had said aloud to no one, barely older than Amber's now. At exactly 11 a.m., the boutique door chimed, and there she was. Marissa stepped inside wearing a dark gray coat, clean this time, with black suede gloves and a messenger bag slung over one shoulder. Her hair was pulled back. She looked almost ordinary, but no one dared to treat her that way. Everyone turned to face her. Amber straightened her spine, but said nothing. Chloe smiled nervously. Good morning, Miss Garella. Marissa gave her a polite nod. Brandon stepped out from the back office, walking toward her slowly. Miss Garella, he said carefully, we've been expecting you. I'm not here for ceremony, she said softly. Just the keys. He reached into his pocket without hesitation and handed them to her. She held them in her hand for a moment, as if weighing more than just metal, then walked to the center of the boutique. She turned in a full circle, taking in the space, the walls, the racks, the faces. Finally, she spoke. This place looks exactly how I feared it would. No one dared speak. It's beautiful, polished, cold, efficient, and hollow. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. You sell image here, not identity. Labels, not legacy. You talk more about price than process. Amber opened her mouth, but Brandon shot her a glance that silenced her. Marissa stepped toward a mannequin wearing a sequin dress. She ran her fingers down the fabric. This dress, she said, is loud. Expensive. It'll be worn once. For a photo. And forgotten. Then she turned to Harper. Let me see your notebook. Harper blinked, startled, but got up and handed it over without a word. Marissa flipped through the pages. Her expression changed, not with surprise, but approval. You understand form. Negative space. You sketch emotion, not just garments. Harper looked down, overwhelmed. Thank you. Marissa nodded once, then turned back to the room. I bought this boutique to rebuild what is forgotten, not to fire everyone, but to wake it up. Brandon breathed again. Amber didn't. Marissa continued. There will be changes. Some of you will stay. Some won't. You won't be judged by your resume, but by what you see when you look at a piece of thread. Then she walked to the window, pulled the velvet curtain aside, and let the sunlight pour in. The age of selling illusions is ending. From now on, this place will mean something again. No one moved. No one spoke. Then she turned to Harper. You're hired. Intern. Starting now. You'll learn everything I know. Harper's eyes widened, but she didn't move. Amber whispered, almost involuntarily, What about the rest of us? Marissa stared at her for a long moment. Then she simply said, You'll show me who you are, not by dressing up, but by showing me what you've built. Then she walked to the back office, now hers, and closed the door. For the first time, the boutique didn't feel quiet. It felt alive. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it started that afternoon. Marissa didn't hold meetings or hand out memos. She simply unlocked the storage room that no employee had touched in years and started pulling out rolls of raw fabric, linen, muslin, wool, and even hand-dyed cottons. She brought them to front display tables, cleared away the perfume testers and crystal bowls, and laid the fabric down like it was treasure. It was the first time the boutique had ever smelled like thread. Brandon watched from a distance, still adjusting to the shift. The man who used the direct fittings now stood quietly, taking notes. Chloe followed Marissa silently, learning without asking, and Amber, shaken but not gone, hovered near the corner, unsure where she stood in this new world. Customers still came, but they were greeted differently now. Gone were the practice smiles and rehearsed lines. Instead, Marissa trained everyone to ask questions that had never mattered before. What brought you here today? What does comfort mean to you? What memory do you want this dress to hold? At first, people were confused. Then they opened up. Some cried, some smiled, and more than a few walked out empty-handed, but full-hearted. Harper shadowed Marissa like a quiet shadow, sketching while the older woman taught with gestures and fabric swatches. She learned how to drape a coat without pins, how to read posture before offering a silhouette, and how to say more with 10 stitches than most people could with a whole runway. Late one afternoon, Chloe found Harper in the back room, staring at a mannequin, her hand shaking. Block? Chloe asked gently. Harper nodded. I've never designed a full look, only pieces, ideas. Chloe smiled. Let me tell you a secret. Most designers don't have block. They have fear. Fear of not being enough. But you already got past the hardest part. What's that? You stayed. Harper smiled shyly, then kept working. Amber, meanwhile, kept to herself. She still dressed sharp, still wore heels that clicked across the tile, but her eyes were different now, watchful, humbled. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She refolded garments, straightened hangers, picked threads off the floor. One evening, as the boutique closed, Marissa approached her. "I don't dislike you," she said plainly. Amber stiffened. "I dislike what this place made you think you had to be." Amber didn't reply. Marissa continued. "Do you actually like fashion?" Amber looked her in the eye. "I like being seen." Marissa nodded slowly. "Then learn to be seen for the right reasons. The fabric, not the facade." The next morning, Amber arrived without makeup. It was a small change, but it rippled. Customers noticed. Some felt the boutique had lost its sparkle. They didn't return, but many stayed, and new ones came. Artists, stylists, older women looking for meaning, younger girls tired of trends. Even local seamstresses began dropping by to admire the handiwork. Brandon watched it all unfold with a sense of disbelief and awe. He had once believed luxury meant scarcity, but Marissa taught him that the real luxury was soul. 3 weeks in, a famous editor from New York stopped by. She had heard whispers about a boutique in Beverly Hills that didn't act like a boutique anymore. She left 2 hours later without buying a thing, but wrote a glowing piece titled, "The Woman Who Dusted Off Fashion's Heart." It went viral. Within 48 hours, Beverly Lux had a waiting list, not for clothes, for consultations. And Marissa, she didn't do interviews. She didn't relaunch her brand. She simply taught. Every day, until the boutique no longer felt like a store. It felt like a studio, a space where stories were sewn, not sold. It was a Saturday when the first camera crew showed up. They weren't invited. A luxury lifestyle channel had caught wind of the boutique's transformation and sent a producer, a cameraman, and a bright-eyed host wearing heels too high for standing on marble. They walked in mid-morning, when the store was already buzzing with quiet conversations and rolling garment racks. Amber saw them first. She tensed. Her instinct from the old days kicked in. Smile, offer champagne, start the pitch. But she paused, then walked toward the back room and knocked once. Marissa opened the door, her sleeves rolled, scissors in hand. "There's a crew here. Cameras. They say they want to feature you," Amber said. Marissa didn't flinch. "Did we invite them?" Amber shook her head. "Then they can browse," Marissa replied, and shut the door again. Amber stood there for a second, lips slightly parted. Then, strangely, she smiled. The crew roamed for nearly 20 minutes. The host approached Chloe first. "So what's it like working in the store that everyone's talking about?" she asked, holding a mic an inch from her chin. Chloe shrugged. "It's quieter now, but the silence means something." That wasn't the answer they wanted. They tried Harper next, who was laying out swatches on a flat table. "Are you the protégé?" the host asked with an excited grin. Harper looked up, confused. "I'm a student." "Student of who?" Harper looked toward the back, then smiled faintly. "Of the lady who owns the dust." The host blinked. "I'm sorry, the dust?" "She says real creation happens in the places people forget. Dust settles on diamonds and garbage the same way. The difference is what's underneath." The host clearly didn't know what to do with that answer. Eventually, the crew left. They didn't get what they came for. But that was the point. Later that evening, Harper asked Marissa why she hadn't taken the spotlight. Marissa sat beside her, threading a needle. "Spotlights don't make things grow," she said. "They bleach things out." That night, Brandon locked the boutique alone. He took a moment, just one, to walk through the space. No more flashy centerpieces. No more overpriced decorations. Just racks filled with hand-shaped work. Tables with sketches in progress. Mirrors smudged with fingerprints from real fittings. He smiled to himself. Amber stayed later, too. She sat in the fitting room, flipping through old magazines she used to study religiously. Ads. Trends. Perfect models. Plastic smiles. Then she tossed them aside and started organizing fabric samples instead. On Sunday morning, a woman entered the boutique, wearing a familiar cream-colored trench coat. Everyone looked up. It was a woman in diamonds, the same one who had mocked Marissa during her first visit. But now, her makeup was subtle. Her hair was tied back. She clutched the trench coat with both hands like it meant more now. "I wanted to show her I still have it," she said softly. Chloe nodded. "She's in the back. Give her a moment." The woman sat down and waited without fuss. No special treatment. No ego. Just a client. When Marissa emerged minutes later, she didn't blink at the familiar face. She only said, "That coat held up well." The woman's voice broke slightly. "It's the only piece I've never been able to replace." Marissa smiled. "Good pieces aren't meant to be replaced," she said. Outside, a breeze swept down Beverly Drive, kicking up a bit of dust from the sidewalk. It swirled near the boutique's display window, where a small, handwritten sign now read, "We see beyond the seams." And for the first time in a long time, that street corner didn't feel like part of the city. It felt like the edge of something new. 1 week later, the invitations went out. No glossy envelopes. No gold embossing. Just folded linen cards, handwritten in blue ink, with a return stamp from the boutique itself. They were sent to past clients, old partners, former employees, and a handful of neighborhood regulars who had once been too intimidated to step inside. On the front, the card read, "An evening with the hands who stitch." Inside, "Come as you are. Leave how you were meant to be." Amber was in charge of the guest list. Brandon coordinated refreshments with a local bakery. Chloe and Harper designed a display of sketches that charted the boutique's transformation, from the era of opulence to the season of substance. Marissa refused to call it a relaunch. "This is not a beginning," she told them. "It's just us finally arriving." By 6 o'clock on Thursday evening, the space was lit with soft amber bulbs, shelves lined with books about textile history, and mannequins dressed in raw, unfinished work, each pinned with a photo of the seamstress or tailor who made it. People arrived slowly. First, it was a retired librarian named Miss Helen, who used to walk past the boutique every day without ever stepping in. She wore a 15-year-old blouse she hoped someone could mend. Then came Jared, an accountant who once overheard the mocking in the boutique and told no one. He walked in with a bouquet of lavender and a look of regret. The boutique didn't judge. It welcomed. But the real moment came just after 8 p.m. A hush fell over the room as a woman stepped forward to the center, tall, poised, wearing a jacket stitched from scraps. Each panel a different story, a different hand. It was Marissa. She stood in front of everyone, her hair brushed simply, her boots scuffed. And then she began. "I was not always welcomed in this place," she said softly. "Not because the store rejected me, but because we once built walls made of mirrors." The room was quiet. She continued, "Luxury, when defined by exclusion, becomes a cage. You spend your life peering in, wishing you belonged. But true craftsmanship, real beauty, that should invite you closer." Brandon, standing near the drinks table, set down his glass. Chloe squeezed Harper's hand. "I was mocked for how I looked," Marissa said. "But fabric doesn't care about your appearance. It only responds to your hands, your patience, your intent." A murmur moved through the crowd. "I came here once, covered in dust. Now I wear it with pride, because it reminds me where this came from, not a palace, but a place where people work." She held up her jacket sleeve. This stitch was done by Chloe, who learned how to fold without cutting too deep. This one by Harper, who learned to let her lines breathe. This shoulder seam by Brandon, who finally admitted he didn't know everything. Laughter gently filled the room. "And this center seam," she said, tapping her chest, "was done by someone who believed I didn't belong here. And they were right, I didn't. Not until I changed what here meant." The audience was frozen. Then, as if by instinct, every person in the room stood and began to clap. Not polite applause. Raw, human gratitude. Amber had tears in her eyes. She stepped forward with camera and snapped a photo. No filters, no edits, just the truth. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the boutique returned to stillness, Marissa sat by the window with a cup of cold tea. Outside, another woman passed by, clothes wrinkled, hands calloused. She paused, noticing the soft glow from within. Marissa looked up, their eyes met. The woman gave a small nod, then stepped inside. No one stopped her. She belonged already, because in this boutique, stories were fabric, and every thread was welcome. 2 days after the gathering, the boutique phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Amber answered, assuming it was another customer inquiring about the new community garments the boutique had begun to feature. But instead, a clipped, formal voice spoke through the line. This is Clara Whitmore. I'd like to speak with the owner of the shop. Amber's breath caught. Clara Whitmore, the founder, the original Clara, the same woman whose name once hung in silver across the awning before it was removed and replaced with a hand-stitched sign that simply read Threads. Amber hesitated, then replied, She's here. Please hold. In the workroom, Marissa was bent over a patch of linen, helping Harper correct a misaligned M. She barely reacted when Amber whispered, It's Clara. She's on the phone. Marissa slowly stood up. She didn't rush. She didn't shake. She took the phone. Clara, she said simply. I've been hearing things, the voice said on the other end, crisp but older than Marissa remembered. Articles, posts, even some investors talking about a filthy woman who stormed into my boutique and turned it into a charity closet. Marissa exhaled quietly. I didn't storm in, she said. I walked in, and I never called it mine. Clara paused, as if considering the weight of the words. And yet, Clara continued, you have people talking, and money moving, and clients returning. Not just the rich ones, but the real ones. Marissa didn't reply. Tell me, Clara said finally, what are you doing that I didn't? It was not a challenge. It was something else, a kind of surrender. Marissa's voice was steady. You made fashion into aspiration. I made it into invitation. A long silence. Then Clara said, I'm in town. I'll stop by tomorrow. She hung up. No pleasantries. No fake warmth. But Amber, who had been listening nearby, felt her skin prickle. The queen was coming home. The next morning, before sunrise, the boutique was cleaned until the floors gleamed. No one told them to. It just happened. Chloe swept. Brandon polished the mirrors. Harper rearranged the latest display with trembling hands. By 9 a.m., Clara arrived. She stepped out of a black sedan wearing a coat that looked like it had been made from midnight itself. Rich velvet, tailored shoulders, glinting buttons. Her hair was sharp, her eyes sharper. She walked in without knocking. For a moment, no one moved. Then Marissa stepped forward, wiping her palms on her apron. Welcome back, she said. Clara scanned the room. The mannequins in simple linen. The shelf of community-donated fabric. The chalkboard listing free. Sewing classes. Her gaze landed on a dress in the corner. Raw silk, dyed with tea leaves, unfinished hem. It was honest, messy, beautiful. Clara walked to it slowly. She lifted the sleeve. You let the seams show, she muttered. Marissa nodded. People want to know how things are made. Clara traced a stitch with her finger. I hit every flaw for 30 years, she said, her voice lower now. Now flaws are featured. They're not flaws, Marissa said. They're fingerprints. Clara turned, eyes finally locking with hers. You're good, she said quietly. Marissa held her gaze. I had to be. Another pause. Clara walked toward the exit, but just before she reached the door, she turned back and said, There's a jacket in your window. Blue one. Is that for sale? Marissa looked surprised. It's unfinished. Clara smirked. So am I? Then she walked out, leaving behind the faintest scent of old perfume and an unspoken approval that washed over the entire room. No one said a word, but something in the air had shifted. The boutique had been tested, and it had passed. By the end of that week, something strange began happening. Customers started filming their visits to Threads, not just the clothes, but the people. Videos of Marissa gently coaching Harper on a hem. Chloe sketching a dream dress for a shy teen. Brandon reading aloud letters from people who had once felt unworthy to walk into a boutique. These clips, warm and imperfect, began circulating online. At first, it was just a few hundred views. Then thousands. Then millions. The story of the dirty woman who shook the boutique made its way into a viral video compilation on a popular lifestyle channel. News outlets picked it up, digging into Marissa's background, her disappearance from the industry, her return in rags, and the transformation she sparked. She didn't give interviews. She didn't need to. The footage said it all. One clip in particular, grainy but powerful, showed the very moment Marissa entered Threads for the first time. Her coat hanging open, hair unkempt, dirt visible on her sleeves. The security footage, leaked anonymously, captured the gasps, the sneers, the disgust. And then her turning around, looking straight into the camera, right before speaking the words that silenced the boutique. "I don't need your approval. I came for the truth." That line became a rallying cry, printed on hoodies, scribbled on protest signs outside other elitist boutiques, chanted in fashion schools across the country. The boutique, once trembling on the edge of closure, now had waiting lists for consultations, designers volunteering to donate one collection a year, and local college students requesting internships not for prestige, but for purpose. And yet, Threads didn't expand wildly. It stayed small, intimate, real. Marissa refused offers from investors, turned down a feature in a reality series, even ignored a licensing deal from a global luxury brand that wanted to use her likeness for a campaign about inclusive beauty. "We're not a brand," she said once, sipping herbal tea behind the register. "We're a conversation." One evening, as the boutique prepared to close, a woman entered. She was older, dressed plainly, holding a manila envelope. Her name was Carol. She worked for Clara Whitmore. In her hands were legal documents. A quiet hush fell over the room as Marissa opened them. Inside, transfer of the Clara Whitmore brand name, trademarks, and original boutique property, accompanied by a handwritten note. "I built a castle of glass and mirrors. You made a home with wood and warmth. I'd rather be remembered for yours. Clara." Amber's hand went to her mouth. Harper teared up. "Marissa?" She folded the note, tucked it into her pocket, and quietly said, "We'll honor it." That night, the neon sign outside, the one hand stitched and barely holding on, was taken down. The next morning, a new one went up. It didn't say Clara Whitmore. It didn't say Threads. It simply said, "Open." A signal, a message, a promise. And from that day forward, people stopped walking past a boutique. They walked in, even if their shoes were muddy, even if their shirts were wrinkled, even if they felt too broken to belong anywhere, because they knew this was a place where stories weren't erased. They were worn, out loud, and what happened next would shake the world even more. 2 months after the rebranding, a chill settled over the city. Winter's wind slipped through alleyways and around the boutique's newly polished glass windows. Inside, warm lights glowed against exposed brick and soft jazz filled the air. Marissa stood by the entrance, her hands wrapped around a mug of spice cider. She had just helped a young father pick out a dress for his daughter's school recital, a first for him. He had said thank you twice, then left in tears. It was almost closing time when she saw the silhouette. A woman stood outside the boutique, wearing a long blue dress, outdated, sun-bleached, too light for the season. Her face was obscured by a scarf, and she clutched a small handbag to her chest like it held something precious. Marissa opened the door before the woman even reached for it. "Come in," she said gently. The woman hesitated, looking around, as if unsure whether the invitation was real. Inside, Harper glanced up from folding scarves. Amber lowered her sketch pad. Brandon took a step forward, but stopped when he noticed Marissa's subtle nod, a signal to let her handle this. The woman stepped in. Her shoes were soaked, her hands chapped and red, her eyes sunken from exhaustion. She walked slowly, taking in every detail, the clothes, the displays, the chalkboard that read, "You are more than your labels." Marissa approached softly. "Can I help you find something?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she unzipped her handbag and pulled out a carefully folded envelope. She handed it to Marissa with trembling fingers. Marissa opened it. Inside was a clipping, yellowed and crinkled, of a magazine article from 15 years ago. It featured Marissa smiling on a rooftop, arms crossed, with a headline, "The Heiress of Elegance, Clara Whitmore's Secret Protege." Marissa froze. She hadn't seen that photo in years. The woman in front of her slowly lowered her scarf. And then everyone froze. Harper's hand went to her chest. Amber let out a whisper. It was Clara Whitmore. But not the Clara from the photos. Not the one in sleek suits and glossy hair and signature red lipstick. This Clara looked tired. Her hair gray at the roots. Her posture hunched. Her face, once broadcast on Fashion Week runways, now softened by time and regret. "You're—" Harper began, unable to finish. Clara nodded. "I'm not here to reclaim anything," she said, voice raw. "I'm here to return something I never should have taken." She looked around the boutique, at the love sewn into every corner, at the laughter coming from the back room, at the chalk drawings on the walls left by neighborhood kids. "You built what I never could," she said to Marissa. "And I need to tell you the truth before I disappear for good." Everyone was silent. Marissa met her gaze. Clara stepped forward, voice low. "I never fired you." The room went still. "I didn't know," she continued, breathing hard. "They told me you left, that you were unstable, that you burned bridges. I believed them. I never looked into it. I was too busy protecting the brand. And when I finally realized the truth, it was too late. You were gone." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I built a tower out of fear, Marissa. You burned it down with kindness, and the world's better for it." She reached into her bag and pulled out one last thing, a small velvet box. Inside, a single silver pin. It was the original Clara Whitmore signature brooch, the one she wore during her first Fashion Week in Paris, the one she swore she'd never give to anyone. She held it out. "For you." Marissa didn't take it immediately, not because of anger, but because of the weight behind the gesture. The room remained quiet. Finally, Marissa accepted the pin, closed the box, and placed it behind the register. Then she walked over to Clara and embraced her, not out of obligation, but because something had been waiting to heal for far too long. Clara's body shuddered as she clung to her, and for the first time in her life, the queen of fashion cried in public. The next morning, the boutique opened just as it always had, with the soft jingle of the front bell, the smell of cinnamon rolls brought in by Brandon, and Amber sketching near the sun-drenched window. But something felt different. There was a warmth in the air that hadn't been there before, like something long buried had finally been unearthed. News had already begun to travel, not through headlines or social media, but through whispers, through the careful words of women who passed each other on the street, and the awe in the eyes of a retired editor who had once covered every Clara Whitmore line in New York. Clara hadn't stayed long after that night. She declined offers or interviews, refused to take photos, and quietly booked a one-way ticket out of the city. But before leaving, she wrote a letter, left behind in an envelope on the boutique's counter, addressed simply to the real designer. Marissa didn't read it right away. Instead, she tucked it beneath the register, letting the energy of the store carry her forward. She focused on her customers, her team, and the life she had rebuilt. But even without the words from that letter, the message was clear. Clara had finally passed the torch. And Marissa? She didn't need a headline to prove her worth anymore. Her boutique began to draw in people from all corners of the city, not because of its style, though it had plenty, but because of its spirit. There was no judgment when people walked in. There was no pressure to fit anything. There was just grace. It became known as a shop where single moms found dresses for court hearings, where teen girls tried on prom gowns or secondhand shoes, and where one man, a grieving husband, bought a scarf every year on his wife's birthday because she once smiled in that boutique. Amber's design soon caught the attention of a quiet fashion house in Chicago. They asked if she would like to apprentice under their lead designer. She said yes, only after Marissa promised to keep her corner sketch station untouched. Brandon took over the store's social media, not with slick marketing, but with candid photos and honest captions like, "We cried with Mrs. Elkins today because she finally picked a dress for her 50th anniversary." Harper launched a monthly, open closet night, where donated outfits were re-gifted to women escaping shelters, and the boutique turned into a safe haven with fairy lights, tea, and quiet hugs. One rainy evening, a luxury SUV pulled up in front of the boutique. Out stepped a tall woman in red-soled heels and a tailored coat. She was accompanied by an assistant and a photographer. Marissa recognized her instantly. Lorraine Dash, the editor-in-chief of New Style, a national fashion magazine that once declined to even interview her. Lorraine walked through the boutique with her signature cool grace. She touched the lace on a vintage sleeve, inspected a handwritten tag that read, "Made with recovery and resilience," and stood in front of a mirror, silent. Then she turned to Marissa. "I'd like to feature this place," she said, "but not in the trend column." Marissa raised an eyebrow. In the legacy feature, Lorraine added, "The one we reserve for women who redefine fashion from the ground up." There was no pause, no hesitation. Marissa smiled. "You'll have to wait in line like everyone else," she said kindly. Lorraine chuckled, nodding. And just like that, the boutique that once had a cracked window and a single bulb flickering above its door had become something far more powerful than any runway. It became a mirror, one that didn't reflect perfection but truth, one that allowed people to see themselves as they were meant to be. No labels, no shame, just beautiful, honest humanity. Marissa stood behind the counter as the lights dimmed that night, the silver brooch from Clara gleaming softly on her lapel. And for the first time since she had walked into that boutique covered in dust and doubt, she felt seen. Not because of what she wore, but because of what she had built. A place where even the most dirty woman could walk in and leave the room shaken in all the right ways.